authorized to fire at will.
Hey, good Friday evening, Friday night, Friday. I don't know. Some of you it might be almost Friday morning, depending on where you're watching. Could be Friday morning if you're a couple of my European friends and fans that are paying attention. So if you are watching, thanks for tuning in. Like, comment, and share, if you will. I'm really excited tonight to have Mr. Bearded Truth on. He will be joining us here shortly. He is from Muddied Waters Media. He has latched onto the coattails of Spike Cohen and Matt Wright, and they have given him a platform. I can't pick on him too much for that because at least someone has given him a platform. I had to make my own, but he likes to spit some truth over there in a libertarian perspective, and we're going to be having him on for episode 3. For some of you, it's showing up as episode 4. It's supposed to be episode 3. We had to do some rescheduling, so Jason got to come on before a couple of other people, and he's in a really good position because he came in second behind Spike, who euphemistically refers to himself as the bronze medalist in the vice presidential race. So I guess Jason's the bronze medalist for the Libertarian Lowdown on Minnesota Black Robe Regiment. And also a first, as I'm picking on him because he's not here to defend himself at the moment. He was jamming to my intro music. I've never had anybody else jam to my intro music before. So anyway, you guys know the deal. Check out the coffee. Best coffee you will ever have. Full-bodied medium roast, fair trade, all organic, custom roasted, custom blended for me by Brandon and Carla. Got nice little merchandise here. If you guys can see, it's really shiny. So I have been relatively quiet this week, as some of you know. I did my Monday night musings with my good friend Travis, Rojo Loco, and I just took the rest of the week off. We had a Veteran Nation vacation this week. We didn't do our show on Tuesday night because Skipper Arthur, my co-host over there on Vet Nation, said, I'm taking a week off and going on vacation with my family. So I guess that's a thing. Probably go before we have to take out second equity loans on our homes to be able to afford gas to go to the grocery store at this rate. But so it's been kind of a quiet week for me, and I thought I'd come into it just guns blazing. Bringing in a libertarian to just really upset my fan base. So before I lose y'all, go over and check out my Subscribestar Minnesota Black Robe Regiment podcast. We need all the support we can get to keep this content going. We are working really hard. And when I say we, it's literally I have some people that are working with me. We're working really hard to get endorsed and unendorsed candidates for office here in the state of Minnesota and other places to come on and talk. I'm expanding the Libertarian Lowdown series, and I'm actually thinking about starting up a auditing series where I go around and do some auditing in some of the local municipalities around here because it doesn't happen around here very often, and it's something that needs to get done, and it needs to be handled in a way that's respectful and decent, but constitutionally minded. So I'm thinking about doing that. So your thoughts on that would be encouraged. Give me feedback. So I'm going to bring Jason in. I'm going to let him introduce himself because most people are much better at introducing themselves than I am.
Hey,
bearded Merkin.
Bearded Merkin. Yes, sir. Hey, thanks you so much for having me.
Thanks for doing this.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm honored and privileged as always.
What is that? What is that bourbon I see on the table behind you?
This is actually you're gonna shame me. This isn't even my bourbon. It's my wife's, but it's Backbone Bourbon, and it was for her working on the presidential campaign that got the bronze medalist in 2020. But it was signed by Jo Jorgensen herself, saying thank you, Kelsey, for all your work. So it's a nice little prop because I'm third medalist on Muddied Waters Media and third medalist for being the Libertarian coming here. So might as well show somebody else.
Which is better than the fourth runner-up. which is
Yeah.
Eric Parker tomorrow. So
Yes. So I beat Eric Parker. That's the important thing here.
hopefully you're the only one that beats Eric this year. Wait a minute.
Also true.
So you have Backbone Bourbon behind you, which belongs to your wife.
Yes.
And you're sipping. What are you sipping?
So this is just oh geez, what do I have? I think it's just a Woodford Reserve, I believe. I'm not positive.
Your show makes way too much money if you can afford that kind of stuff.
No, I just have a successful wife, as portrayed by the wonderful trophy I have in the back.
Yeah, your wife does. Your wife does branding stuff. If I understand correctly.
She does. She's a graphic designer. She's loved and adored. She works for Republicans, Democrats, and Libertarians. She works in the realtor industry as well. She's turning some heads out there. So, just an incredible woman, and came at it from a different perspective than a lot of people do, which I think is pretty synonymous for having a libertarian come on here. We come at things from a different perspective. And so she's been able to do amazing and wonderful things from that. So I'm
let's pitch her. What's the name of her business?
So if you guys want to, rebrand your business, campaign, whatever it is, and you're looking for a graphic designer that understands it all, head over to KelseyLyonDesigns.com, Lyon, KelseyLyonDesigns.com. Head over there. She's going to hook you up. Use the code Muddied Waters. We don't have one set up for you yet. Use the code Muddied Waters.
Yes,
she's going to.
Yes, he says, as if that's even something we taught. I just dropped this on Jason. By the way, he had no idea I was going to do this. So,
is that tea or is that bourbon as well? Because I mean, it's okay for either.
Well, no, it's neither actually. It is a combination of Coke Zero and sparkling ice lemonade. So
it sounds like a delicious concoction.
It is, because I this is gonna sound bad, not because I actually had a problem, but I was tired of not losing weight as fast as I had been. Like about 4.5 years ago, I was 300 pounds.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Congratulations. That's impressive.
And I have about 20 more pounds. I want to get down to about 190, 195. And I enjoy my rum in my drinks at night. And I realized that I was doing everything right, but I wasn't bleeding the weight off, even like through sweating it out. So this is my show, by the way. This is how it goes with everybody I have on. This is just what
it's beautiful.
So I got up a couple of weeks ago and I had about a half a bottle of really inexpensive rum left, and instead of downing it before work, which would have been a very bad idea, I just poured it down the drain, and I said, I'm not going to drink anymore until I get down to my my target weight.
That's beautiful.
So now you
got a celebration on the way, it sounds like.
Yeah, I got, I want to get 190, 195. I haven't been under 200 pounds since one time, 2 years, almost 2 years, year and a half ago, I broke 200, and I celebrated by going on vacation to South Dakota, the land of the free in the upper Midwest. And then I blew it while on vacation. So
we tend to do that.
But I have not gone up over 218 in 2 years. So
that's incredible.
I'm hoping that some of the weight loss and the fact that I'm not losing as much as fast as I was is coming from the fact that I'm not sedentary. My current job requires a lot of moving and lifting. So I look a lot more broad and solid than I actually am. I'm mostly just fluff.
I love it. So I know you would ask, and we jumped around on this a little bit. It's so that your viewers know who I am.
Intro yourself, your show, and your network.
That's a paragraph. Yes, my name is Jason Lyon. I am just your average run-of-the-mill activist. I started in the Navy nuclear program of the Navy. That's redundant.
NPTU.
Yes, sir. And so I went down and served the country on submarines for a little bit, and got out of that, and while I was on board, I had a guy that I shared the boat with. He was a little bit of a socialist leaning in a lot of his ideologies, and I had no clue about politics. I had no idea about any of this, and so I started doing research just because he was such a smug guy. I was like, I got to prove this guy wrong. So I started diving into stuff and like asking people, what do I need to read? And so from that, I started getting engaged in politics. This was in 2015 era that I started getting involved. 2016, we had the presidential debates between Hillary and Trump. At the time, I was very conservative. I was, I was really interested in the Constitution. I started diving into that. And one thing leads to another. I started realizing some inconsistencies with the way our government was running and the way that the Constitution was framed. And so I just kept going into the dive of that. And about probably around 2017, 2018, after having my podcast going, at the time I was standalone, I started realizing I was a little more libertarian than I was conservative. And I held firmly the Constitution. I read this all the time. I loved it. I became, for your constitutional loving audience, that they may like this, I was a textualist. So in layman's terms, I looked at the text, I read what it meant from their time, their definitions, fell in love with the whole ideology behind it and the timelessness of the document, and kept growing from that. And so over time, I grew more into the Libertarian Party. I had a couple people drag me as I'm kicking and screaming, trying to stay clear of the party, but they drug me into this. And so now I am in the Libertarian Party in some capacities, and some ways I'm stepping away from that. But I've worked professionally in politics for grassroots efforts, instructing, teaching, working on different issues: civil asset forfeiture, certificate of need laws, education reform, healthcare reform, criminal justice reform, all from the basis of these systems are too important to let bad initiatives in them or bad legislation keep us from a better society. And so still hold on dear to the values and the virtues from the Constitution, but just come at it from more of a libertarian perspective of smaller government is better than what
which
you
is actually the original conservative position too. It's very much the original conservative position, which is why I wanted to launch this series, and I was blessed to have Spike on as the first for that.
He's incredible.
And Spike had said some. Did you make it out for the convention?
Not for the national convention, no.
Okay. Spike was there, and he said some things at the national convention in his speech that I thought were just absolutely phenomenal. One of those being, all right, non-Mises caucus side, if you win, you have some things you have to take care of and some stuff you have to address. And Mises caucus, if you win, you have some things that you have to address, and you need to come at this in a way where you're working with people you have disagreed with on other issues. Find those issues that you do agree on and work with them and advance each other's agendas in those areas where you agree. Mm-hmm. And that, and that was post my conversation with him, because that's the direction I've been moving. I've had Bull Johnson.
Yes.
I've had Bull on here, and Bull and I are in pretty much daily contact with one another, because Bull and I have an idea where we want to work together to do kind of what you do, which is that grassroots drive for constitutionalism. And my goal with this is having you on, and having had Anthony Welty on, and now having had Spike on, and now having some of these others coming on as well, is to reach across the aisle, not to the Democrats, because I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm not saying that there isn't hope for them, but for the most part, the Democrats can't move to the left fast enough. They really want to go to the left, and they want to go hard, and they want to go fast while they have the momentum. And the Libertarian Party is putting the brakes on and saying, no, we of all people should be constitutionalists, and not just constitutionalists for those issues where we agree with people, but we should be conservatively constitutionalists and be taking a very literal interpretation of the Constitution. And that's something that the conservative base of the Republican Party should be able to get behind.
Yes.
And should be looking at libertarian candidates, weighing that out and asking hard questions of them. And the way that we do that is to have conversations with people where maybe, and I'm not saying this is a case for you, Jason, but maybe the libertarian that's across the aisle, from you, or sitting across the table from you, maybe their idea of being pro-life has some certain exceptions to it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're not a strict abolitionist, but we do know that there is an end goal there, and that end goal is reduce the number of abortions.
Yes.
And I'm only using this obviously as a example.
Yeah.
And so instead of looking at it from the conservative Republican view, which is, I have to say I'm pro-life, and then I have no idea what I'm talking about, which means we have to spend millions and millions and millions of dollars of money, of American dollars, on this, not through taxation, but through donation to alleged Republican candidates who are allegedly pro-life, to pass legislation which isn't stopping anybody from killing their babies. Well, I might be able to work with a libertarian who says, my goal is to end abortion. I don't want to get the federal government involved. I want to take that money and go out and build a resource center, build an adoption
agency. I feel like you're steel manning my argument right now, because I am a pro-life absolutist. Without diving into a lot of other unconnected topics, the war on drugs has been won by the drugs in a lot of ways. The war on poverty, we have more poverty now than before. The war on terror, there's more terror in the world today than when we started.
Well, and the war on terror has made it possible for them to label people like you and I terrorists.
Exactly. So when government declares a war on something, that thing is going to prosper and do better than it ever has in the past. And so, long form short, I want to see abortion be eradicated from our world entirely. I know that the government is not a good means for that. And so, I was fortunate enough to ghostwrite for a couple campaigns, and it was to that effect. We can look at the adoption services. We can look at the foster care services. We can help reform those. We can make birth control cheaper by selling it over the counter rather than requiring an OBGYN appointment, where some people, despite Affordable Care Act, can't actually obtain health insurance because of the cost being driven up because of that. And so, I work hand in hand with people that are pro-choice and with people that are pro-life, to be able to find ways that, because even a pro-choice libertarian still wants to see your tax money go away from this. So there's common ground across this whole spectrum of, the bottom left quadrant, the bottom right quadrant, and then the upper right quadrant of, let's figure out a way to not infringe upon people, but let's find a way to reduce the abortions. And so for that, going off of Spike's speech there in Reno, or in Sparks, Nevada, that's exactly where I'm at. I want to find as many people out there that we can have these conversations with and say, all right, you agree with this, I agree with this, we have the common ground. How do we push forward to make this a success?
Right. And that's it. In there again, not to, I didn't mean to like bang out abortion.
I love talking,
but
you just picked the most emotional topic possible. It's fine. It's okay.
Well, that's literally why I picked it, is because I'm like, we don't have to, delve into it in the sense of really breaking it down, other than to say we all agree. Constitutional conservative libertarians agree with constitutionally conservative Republicans that we need to end it. The difference is how we go about that. and where can we find common ground? And I think that's what's missing from this conversation, because here's the deal. I just post before I got on here and came home, because I was doing fatherly duties for my adult daughter, helping her with her projects, and while I was waiting for it to kind of to be slow down enough where I could come home and I knew I could be dismissed, I was typing something out, kind of calling out the Minnesota GOP, because I've offered my platform to several endorsed candidates, statewide candidates, who have all kind of tacitly said, "Oh yeah, we could see what we can do," and they won't come on. They just, I know, I never hear back from their campaign managers. I've had one who was phenomenal, very constitutional, conservative, but it's what they do is they treat people like us like they have to hold their nose to even walk by us on their way to losing an election. And they just kind of count on us. And I'm like, I'm over here. All right, fine. Keep treating us that way. Maybe we just take our votes, go somewhere else, and just watch you lose again, if that's really how you're going to act, because it's not doing us any good. And if you're going to sit here and compromise with the left and treat your conservative, constitutionally minded, libertarian minded base like garbage, then maybe we can start teaming up with people who are actually going to represent us.
Who actually represent small limited government. Yeah. I think that one of the biggest takeaways from the Constitution, the way that it was ratified and passed in this country, was that was not the radical position. That was common ground. That was middle ground. So all of these things that are now so controversial for people, this was the middle ground for America back in 1776. This was common ground at that time. The idea that, unalienable rights of people to have the right to self-defense, the right to privacy, the right to due process, the right to secrecy, the right to say that the Constitution doesn't actually, sorry, I'm getting into the amendments, which was 89, but
doesn't matter.
Yeah. But, even the 9th and the 10th Amendment, that just because we didn't say what these rights were, doesn't mean that these rights don't exist. And the 10th Amendment saying just because, or if these powers were not enumerated to the federal government, they do belong to the states, or they do belong to the people, to the individuals. Yeah.
I have to remind people all the time too, that just because it says it belongs to the state doesn't mean the state supersedes the people.
Exactly.
The people supersede the state. I just had this conversation with somebody the other day, bringing up nullification. I've actually had this conversation with a couple of people. My friend Travis on Monday night, we talked about nullification, and my friend Larry's watching, and he asked about nullification, and I'm like, and the question, because it comes down to the idea that nullification for, Republicans are great with nullification as long as they're able to nullify something that the federal government does that they don't agree with. But they're against nullification when it comes to a city having a sanctuary for illegal aliens.
Yep.
And I'm like, I got to be consistent. Like if I'm gonna say if a city wants to become a nullify, federal ruling or a federal law that says you can't have concealed carry, and they want to be a constitutional carry state, concealed or open, they can nullify that. But they can also, then I can't turn around and say, well, you can't, be a sanctuary city for illegal aliens. Now, I think that's a different question. I think that the illegal alien aspect in that situation comes down to, that's like the one thing that we should really be trusting the federal government to do, is protect our borders.
And
but no, they can't. So,
No. And I think that that's something that was really interesting. Because I'm somebody who loves and adores the Constitution, but even on the federal borders, I would support an amendment for the federal government to be empowered on that.
Well, there again, it's literally one of the things that they should be doing.
It should be, absolutely.
If we're not being invaded right now, I don't know what an invasion is. We're supplying the guns to the drug runners. You know, So,
That's a massive issue.
but that's
I
what it
just
is.
hope
It's we're literally giving them the guns and the money, either because of the war on drugs, or we're literally giving them guns.
I'm just wondering, like, if I could put on my W-4 that I'm Taliban in the Middle East, or if I can list myself as like the Mexican cartels, to where the government will start funding me with guns and all these things that they won't let the American populace have. But how do we obtain this? Because we got to protect ourselves from the tyranny of what the government's been doing. When we look at the COVID measures and we look at a lot of the stuff that they've been doing.
We say, by the way, we don't mention the virus by name here. We call it the coof.
The coof. Oh,
The coof,
okay.
because when you mention it by name, they
You're
still,
absolutely right.
yep, they still, yep, and yeah.
I can already see the fact checker at the bottom saying, "Oh, did you talk about the coof?" Well, here's some articles on the coof that will tell you the coof is the greatest thing since, or the worst thing since ever. Thank you for the catch.
No, I actually, it's more fun now. Instead of warning people ahead of time, I like to just say it on the air. Except, and now I've had enough people. I've had enough people on. Like I had Buck Johnson on, and now I think he mentioned it the other day on his show. I think he called it the coof on his show too the other day. Might not have been Buck, but anyway.
Are you saying that the coof is spreading like wildfire? Is it like airborne? Like how
The
is
coof the coof might be contagious through social media
beautiful.
and platform.
That's beautiful. Oh, get your mask. You don't want the word coof.
So yeah. Anyway, you were saying before I derailed.
No, you're good. But it's one of those things that, we see where the government says that the American people can't be trusted in a way. And the American people were supposed to be the ones governed by by all the documents. We are the governors over the government. But we can trust these cartels with Fast and the Furious. We can trust, through the Afghanistan pullout, we can trust them with, billions of dollars worth of armaments. But the American people, we have to figure out ways to infringe upon them in the way that they're functioning.
We're gonna just leave a bunch of Apache attack helicopters, some Bradley fighting vehicles, whatever generation they're on, some whatever generation of Abrams tanks those are on, and some Humvees and a lot of firearms. We're just gonna leave a lot of that behind because the Taliban's never done anything evil to their own people, but
nor have they ever threatened us either. So
yeah, but you sitting there wherever you might be at home, watching the January 6th hearings because, it's, well, not anymore. I think they took them off of prime time, but I think the ratings were low. Should have never been there. But you sitting at home watching the primary or the hearings, you can't be trusted. You're a radical. But the cartel, now they would never use anything against. They would
never human. Yeah, they would never human traffic. They would never bring drugs in this country. They would not be a main source of fentanyl. They would never do anything bad. They're benevolent in the way that they function. We should trust them with everything.
Trust them because they are trustworthy people. You had mentioned you had mentioned on your show earlier today. I listened for as long as I could before I had to actually start working. Darn the boss. But you had mentioned with your guest, you had man, my brain froze.
Dennis Missigoy.
Dennis Missigoy, who is a candidate for senator in Florida, by the way, hoping to unseat running against Rubio and somebody else.
Yep.
Excuse me. You had mentioned there, and then you mentioned, in the beginning of this, that one of the things that you really like to talk about is civil asset forfeiture. You also mentioned something else, steel manning. So you have to give my audience a breakdown of what steel manning is. And then I want you to go into a little bit of an explanation of what actual civil asset forfeiture is and what your view is. I know what your view is, but what your view is on it and why that's really important to you. Because to me, having been in that world for almost 13 years. I mean, granted, I was working on the detention end, but it was a conversation I was having constantly with people. Like, they took my money. When do I get it back?
Yeah.
So one, steel manning, civil asset forfeiture, and what your view is and why it's bad.
Okay, perfect. So steel manning. So if you guys think about it from a logical fallacy standpoint, when you straw man somebody, you make their argument as weak as possible in order to kneecap it. You intentionally work to make their arguments as easy as possible to defeat, and you go at it. Steel manning, however, is one of the best things that we can do when we're understanding somebody else's perspective. So when I'm sitting in a conversation with, for example, I had a conversation with somebody about healthcare. They believed in universal healthcare. I believe in more free market practices, as a good libertarian does. And so when they would make an argument, rather than try to find a way to dismiss their argument, I tried to steelman their argument by saying, is this what your argument is? So I would ask them questions to and best relay it as possible to them, so that way that they understand that I'm actually listening to what they're saying. And so when you steelman, you're basically confirming to them that you're listening to them, that you're engaged with them, and that you've heard kind of where they're coming from. And so it shows a shared value and a shared connection there. So it's an incredible thing for effective communication skills. And you nailed it in the beginning there with exactly what a pro-life libertarian, a radical pro-life libertarian, because there's of course a spectrum on that, would view as, we agree with ending it, but we don't just want the government engaged on that front. But for two, civil asset forfeiture. So I was so proud. I was so excited. I got to start a statewide campaign on civil asset forfeiture, teaching people, engaging with people, sitting with representatives, sitting with the executive director for South Carolina, and engaging on this topic. And what civil asset forfeiture is a legal tool allowed for law enforcement to be able to take assets. And that's money, cars, homes, boats, whatever, what have you. They can take these things, and there isn't a necessity by the virtue of just civil asset forfeiture for there to be the owner to be accused of a crime. So this is where you have property that is being accused of a crime. Since a property cannot bear witness to itself, it's treated more as guilty until proven innocent. As an opponent,
which is, and I don't mean to, it's not an oversimplification, but basically what they're doing when they do this is they're assuming you've broken a law to gain access to cash, a car, a house, a boat, a property or whatever, which is why you're saying your property has committed the crime. So I don't want people to think that you're actually saying the property committed a crime, because sometimes my audience is very literal.
Okay.
Like, by property committed, that can happen. Well, actually, yeah, here in the United States, that can happen.
Yeah, and so if it's a benefit of a crime or affiliated with a crime, made it possible for a crime to be committed. So things like that.
There has been no evidence of that.
Exactly. So you'll see in these court cases, when you see them released, they're not commonly released for the public viewing, but you'll see United States versus I've seen like 1996 Firebird, or 1976 Firebird. I've seen, I think one of the ones I sat down with a former prosecutor, a federal prosecutor, and he had a pile of wood. I think that was the one that stood out to him the most. So people look at this and they say, well, there's a lot of benefits to this. This has multiple times in history when it was used. The first time was during Prohibition, and now the big era is during the war on drugs. So this is a tool that is utilized more in the effects of the war on drugs. But there's another process that's allowed, and that is criminal asset forfeiture, wherein if I was accused of a crime, I'm found guilty of a crime, my property was already seized, but upon my conviction, that property is now forfeited. And so this is, from my perspective, this is the way that we should be going, because it guarantees the due process, And without getting into the weeds of it all, this allows for people to actually have representation, because they're being accused of a crime. So then they have the positive right of a right to an attorney.
Yeah, I actually even struggle with asset forfeiture in a criminal case, because a lot of times they take property in a conviction. They take the property of the family without any, well, that's too bad you committed a crime and it hurt your family. Now your family's got to pay the consequences. And there's no way of proving that, the spouse or the kids or whatever contributed to that. Like, it could be a house, could be a vehicle, it could be, money in a bank. And so the problem that I have with civil asset forfeiture is a lack of due process. That they don't even have to articulate, they're not even a reasonable articulable suspicion. You have to really work on that, especially if you're planning on doing any kind of auditing, by the way, because those are hard words to say under pressure. But they don't have to articulate any kind of reasonable suspicion that you even committed a crime. They could just pull you over, fabricate an excuse. Your license plate light is burned out. Oh, well, can we? Do you mind if we search your car? No, I have nothing to hide. Which, of course, is a stupid thing to do in the first place. The answer to that is always no. But then they do. Oh, hey, why do you have $5,000 in cash hanging out in your glove box? Well, I just sold a car. Well, can you prove it? Well, no, I just sold it for cash. Well, in our eyes, that's pretty suspicious. Yep. So we're going to go ahead and seize that $5,000. And now you got to go to court, fight to get that back, and probably end up spending more money to get the $5,000 back than what it's worth. So they know that you're not going to fight to get it back for the most part, because it's going to cost you more in court costs and to get an attorney to fight for it than what it's worth. And they know that. They absolutely know that. And that's why they do it.
Yes. There's two stories that really ring out to me. So one statistic and two stories. The first statistic is in South Carolina, historically, our average is less than $500. That means you pay an attorney 2 hours, you've already exhausted all the money that you would have gotten back from that court case. So you have to represent yourself. It's an incredibly difficult process to do as an individual if you're not familiar with the court process. But the two stories I have is there's one woman in Myrtle Beach. She was in her mid 60s, late 60s. She was a widow. Her husband had passed away. She's living out her days. She would, sit at home, watch TV, make a microwavable dinner, go to the store, and that was her life. And people were selling drugs on the corner of her property at 3:00 in the morning. And police attempted to seize her property because of that. So she wasn't actually a part of this at all, but because she didn't take enough action in order to deter people from selling property in the middle of the night, they came after her. Thankfully, she didn't lose her house. But that was a case that was...
Well, what did they want her to do? Go out there and chase them off with a rolling pin?
She's got a walker, all right? She's got 4 tennis balls. She could throw one. I mean, you got 3 spares. It's ridiculous.
Pretty sure that was their job to stop the crime.
The second story that I had was... No, you're good. The second story I had was a young man who was in very early 20s, had his own apartment, and he got mugged. And so he called the cops and said, I was just assaulted. And the cops come over to his house to see, to do their investigation like they do. And upon going into his house, they find out that he's been self-medicating with cannabis for whatever reason. And they found...
I like how you put that. Self-medicate.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what they described it as. I'm using their words. And so he also had about, I think the number was around $800 in cash sitting near the drugs. So they decided to confiscate both of those through administrative forfeiture. They took the drugs. Through civil asset forfeiture, they took the money. Well, that was the guy's rent money that he was actually planning to leave the next morning to go pay his rent for that apartment. and was evicted from his house because he didn't, or from his apartment because he didn't have the money to pay the rent. It takes months for people to get their money back through these processes as well. And so
and very rarely get it all.
Yes. It's
very
rough.
rarely. Yeah.
So it's something that I'm incredibly passionate about. I'm huge on talking about criminal justice reform overall, but civil asset forfeiture is the one that I see. I've been fortunate enough, and hopefully your viewers will find value in this, that I spoke at the Republican Party event, I spoke at a Democrat Party event, and I spoke at the NAACP, and I was able to get them all to endorse the movement and to come lock hands or lock arms with one another and push forward to help end civil asset forfeiture. We created a panel, and then the coup happened. So
good job.
The coup stopped everything. We'll get it
Funny
back.
How that works. So you switched to your merchandise.
Oh yeah, no, the glass ran out, so back to the water.
I normally have my black coffee mug sitting here, but I wanted more. But now I feel like I should just act like I'm sipping out of one of my pieces of merchandise.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what you guys just think, that there's liquid in this. This is
he's just got some. He's got some Legos in there, and he's making the ice sound. This is one of the reasons why these conversations are so important, because what you just said is exactly what I'm hoping for. Is we have to get out there, and I'm not talking about finding a middle ground, because anytime you find a middle ground, only one side's really ultimately going to end up compromising on that.
Yes.
And in being able to go out to the Democrats, being able to go out to the Republicans, to go out to the NAACP, and getting them all to agree on something like that is not an issue of compromise. It's an issue of, this is wrong. This is criminally wrong because it's constitutionally wrong. And the fact that, it exists as law in every single state, I can't think of a state that doesn't allow for it as of right now. Are you aware? It might be limited, but it still is allowed.
And one of the issues there, so North Carolina is a state that got rid of it. But the problem is that even in a state that has it where it's been written at the state level, it's also a federal level issue as well. So what they do is, when they want to actually exercise using civil asset forfeiture, they bring a federal agent in to be able to do this.
What a shock. And the feds, the feds, they of course, being who they are like, oh no, we can't do that.
Yeah, of course, they've got your rights on the top of the priority list.
I mean, Old West Montana used to seize people's cars for traffic violations. Oh. It was nothing to see a brand new Corvette or something sitting on a state patrol lot somewhere, and are always like, well, we're going to turn this into a pursuit vehicle. Yeah, right. Which we have seen that there are cars that get turned into, they get seized on an alleged drug bust. Next thing you know, it's painted up with all the DARE stuff, and the DARE officers driving it to the school. And it's never somebody's hoopty either,
No, never.
It's never somebody's beat up old, literally the guy who was literally selling weed to his friend because his friend ran out. It's always like, the brand new Cadillac Escalade.
We had, to the county to the east of me, the sheriff there, who's notorious for using civil asset forfeiture. He has a program that he has a competition with it. But one year he managed to get a that year edition F-150 Raptor truck, and drove that thing around proudly, had the vinyl slapped on it, and was
got
just
that puppy wrapped, did he?
Yeah. And he was super proud of it until everyone in the media was like, look at this dirtbag. Look at what he just stole somebody's vehicle, arguably in violation of the 8th Amendment. It's clearly excessive fines. And so he was like, oh, I don't drive that thing anymore. He gave it to his deputy. So his deputy was driving it around for a couple months. And thankfully they've parked it. But it's just like, man, like, way to gloat about taking people's stuff.
My friend Larry says war on drugs is a massive success. Only 300 people die of overdose each day in the U.S., which is less people, or more people than what we kill on an average day in a counterterrorism activity outside of the United States.
It's 300 more people than the TSA has found for terrorism.
And ouch. Warwick says that's what we did in the campaign for liberty, worked across party lines, right? That's huge. We have to. Now, there again, like we have to be realist. You're probably going to have a hard time reaching across party lines for the most part with the Democrats. Democrats talking about, like, one of your other topics is criminal justice reform. Democrats talk a lot about criminal justice reform. They're not talking about actual criminal justice reform.
No.
What the vast majority of the Democrat Party wants in the United States or in the varied states is not actual criminal justice reform. They want a change in sentencing for whatever group of people they feel is the most oppressed. So if you happen to be in an oppressed class and you commit a crime, they want you to face lesser sentencing than a non-oppressed class of
people.
want
equity. They want equity. Yeah. And that's nowhere in the purview of a justice.
The only drug that you see them moving to not fight against anymore is weed. The Democrats have jumped on board with the legalized weed thing because it endears them to a certain segment of people. Not because, I mean, Nancy Pelosi might act like she's been smoking weed. Normally,
she was drinking for her husband, okay? That way he doesn't get another DUI that gets thrown out.
Well, there you go. But they're really not in favor of it. And the Republicans have this hardline stance on things like marijuana because they've always had to have that stance. They always come out hard against drug legalization. And the law enforcement community always, not always, but the vast majority of the law enforcement community, sheriffs, chiefs of police, police commissions, always come out against it because if you take away marijuana, you take away a base for getting into all the other drug arrests. And when you take away all those drug arrests, you take away a big percentage of what they can point to and say, look what we're doing to protect you. Look what we're doing to solve crime. And there are people who should be arrested for their drug use because a lot of times they're committing crime, but they should be getting arrested for the crime they're committing, not for the crime of having the drug. And at the same time, you want to go out and toke it up, stay at home.
Absolutely.
Or get a sober driver. You want to go out and you want to get high on meth, do it at home. Don't do it in front of your kids. Don't have kids. And then turn around. But also don't expect the state to pick up the pieces for your broken life when you ruin your life. If you ruin your life. And I'm sorry, if you're smoking meth, you're going to ruin your life at some point.
Absolutely.
But there will be no welfare for you. There will be no state assistance for you when you ruin your life. Like, you smoke it up and you ruin your life. Guess what? That's on you, bro.
I really like what they did over in Portugal back in 2003. And what they did was they kind of made a self-serving market there. So they
I can honestly say those words have never been spoken on my program ever before. No one has ever said, I really like what they did in Portugal.
So it's the
I'm and all of my shows, whether they've been recorded or live streamed, no one has ever said, I really like what they did in Portugal. So
you're saying I have the gold medal for once?
You have the gold medal.
I'm texting Spike right now. But so what they did was they kind of agreed with you in a lot of ways in the way of that functioning. But they, instead of treating it like a criminal issue like we do here in the US, they treat it more as a societal issue. And so when you decide that you're going to use drugs, you go to a clinic that they have, you buy their drugs, you use their drugs in a safe environment. You get, you have everything set up for yourself, but they're taxed in a way that people who are already addicted to these drugs now are using those taxpayer dollars from the drug users to help pay for them to go and get treatment to get off of those drugs. And so as a result of this, without having these stigmas that we have, that we all share here, of the negative ramifications, and it's a terrible idea. Of course, it's a terrible idea to do most of these drugs, but it allowed.
But it's your idea.
Yeah,
not yours. I'm not.
Yeah, exactly. It's your right to do what you want with your body. We just think it's a terrible, terrible, terrible idea. But it allows for them to not be afraid of losing their job, of losing their family, of spending years in prison, losing employment opportunities, and not be able to pick themselves up at the end of it. It gives them an opportunity to come clean, to be renewed, and to find a better way in society.
Well, let's I want to touch on something you just said there, though. If your employer wants to tell you that they have a teetotaling when it comes to drugs or even alcohol, if they want to tell you, like, we do not want anybody coming in here under the influence of anything other than a literal prescription for a medical condition, your employer should have the freedom to do that.
Absolutely.
Should absolutely have the freedom to do that. But you shouldn't be in fear of losing your job because you got arrested for having a joint while you were walking down the street to your house to go smoke it, and then you missed work because you got arrested. Now, like, there aren't a lot of jurisdictions where you're going to get anymore where you're going to get arrested for even having a joint, but the issue is it hangs over your head, because the more times you get in trouble for it, the more likely you are to run into a judge that's going to try and make an example of you, which then means you will lose your job.
Exactly. And so people can make terrible ideas as long as they're not, the libertarian perspective. As long as you're not hurting other people, as long as you're not violating other people in the way that they're living, you're not violating their rights, make the stupid decision you want to make. Don't expect us to come and pick you up and to say, it's okay, we're going to take care of you societally, we're going to give you a social safety net and all these other things. No, you have to kind of come to the realization, if you want to be productive in society, if you want to make good decisions for society, society will make good decisions for you. Doesn't really happen when you're strung out each and every day and you're just like, oh, I need a burger. Sorry, bro. Shouldn't have bought that rock.
Right. Choose between the rock or the burger. Sounds like a campaign slogan.
I mean, Dwayne Rock might be running for president soon, so we got to get somebody named Burger to run. This will be beautiful.
I'm sure we could probably work that out. Actually, I've got a friend. I've got a friend here in Minnesota that's running for office. His last name ends with Burger.
Good enough. He's got to run. We gotta coordinate this. I want the Burger versus the Rock.
I like our chemistry. We should do this more often.
I'm down.
People who laugh at my bad jokes. Normally, my guests go. I cracked a couple of good ones I thought with Spike on, and Spike just went. And I'm like, so, Spike, I've heard your opening for Anchor, so.
Spike is special. If you have him on Facebook, he will heart react, and that's about it. He will sad react all of my jokes on Facebook. So he's just a hater, so we could just push him off to the side.
That's because you have better jokes.
He doesn't like dad jokes. Dad jokes are the way forward.
I don't like
this
dad
is the
jokes
way.
either. I don't do dad jokes.
We can't be friends. See, the chemistry broken already. This was. I was going to make a super nerdy joke.
My Canadian friend Ken says, "Happy Friday, TC. Buying you a burger." Well,
there we go.
Well, now they're going to seize your entire bank account for supporting a dissonant voice, Kent. So, thank you. It was great. It was great to have your support before they seized your account. So,
yep, you played yourself. That sucks.
I haven't had a super chat in weeks. It's awesome. I got a super
Spike,
chat.
Spike told you to get super chats. I come on, you get the super chats. He's the bronze medalist. I'm the gold medalist. This is how it works.
Right. Spike. Yeah. Spike told everybody. And now, hey, you could super thank you. You could super thanks me. So if you're watching this in playback, you can actually one up Kent's $6.99. You could go 1 penny and one up Kent's $6.99.
You could turn this into like an auctioneering.
Turn this into
beautiful.
Yeah. Like the best super chatter gets to be my first guest on my first call-in show. Now I have to schedule a call-in show.
That's just do the Anchor call-in moment. There you go.
I don't do Anchor. I need to do Anchor. So the pennies just roll in according to Matt and Spike.
Yes.
The pennies just roll in.
By the dozens. The dozens.
Oh. Matt will never come on now after this. So you're going to have to clip this out and send it to him. So
I will do just that.
You guys got a show coming up, don't you? Another one? Don't you guys do a weekly or?
So Spike and Matt do their show weekly. They have 3 shows.
Right. They have 2 that are available to everyone, to the freeloaders. And then there's one exclusive that's only available on Muddied Waters Media.
So so going through anchor.fm, you can sign up to be an exclusive member. So for me, I only host the Mr. America, the Bearded Truth show Fridays, 2 p.m. Eastern. But I also co-host with Matt Wright, and we do Muddied America, where we talk. Usually it's the most depressing conversations you can have. We do a deep dive into those. So we did the Kyle Rittenhouse situation just after the not guilty verdict. So we broke it down from beginning to end. We just did the Uvalde, Texas school shooting over there at Robb Elementary. And so we inadvertently on that one did 77 minutes worth of a podcast, which was the exact number of minutes that circumstance happened. So
I inadvertently limit to 77 minutes. That's normally my shows go on for way too long. I've always got that one person in the audience. I like your stuff, but they're so long. I'm like, well, how long does it need to be for you to watch it? 15 minutes. So I'll put out a 15-minute video, just a video when it's just me.
Yeah,
that's too long. I'm like, what do you want? I don't do reels.
No. I think that this is the problem with TikTok is everyone's like, oh, I've got 3 minutes max. And
but it's all old people that tell me that. I'm like, what are you doing with your life? You have nothing better to do with your life than to watch my long form. That's
come be a part of the family here. Like, come and just sit down, drink some rum, drink some bourbon, drink whatever you want, and just hang out.
Unless you're trying to lose weight, then don't drink. Or if you shouldn't be drinking.
That too.
And I have a supporter who's watching tonight who's working on their sobriety, and I just want them to understand. Like, go get them. Awesome.
Absolutely.
Proud of you. I'm serious. You know who I am, and I love you, brother. So keep at it. So my dad did that. My dad got sober when I was in 6th grade, and he stayed sober until the day he died. 22 years of sobriety. It is doable. It's an amazing feat. And it's difficult. Alcohol is the worst thing to kick, and it's so freeing when you get off of it. So I'm proud of you, brother. You know who you are. Let's talk a little bit about activism.
Okay.
Because I actually think that activism used to be viewed as a real positive thing if you were on the right side of the political spectrum. And when I mean right side, I don't mean politically right, but I mean just the proper side. Activism is great. So blocking traffic and sit-ins and disrupting meetings, as long as you had the proper socially acceptable socio-cultural, socio-political view, activism is wonderful. But as a friend of mine found out just back in December in a courtroom, because she chose to keep her business open when our governor ordered her to shut her business down, a judge literally spent 25-30 minutes during her sentencing on misdemeanor charges. She got 90 days for that, by the way. 90 days in jail in the state of Minnesota on misdemeanor charges for keeping her business open. And the judge told her that if you want to be a political activist, which is what you're doing, he said, you are being a political activist and you're not doing it the right way. The only way to be a political activist is to take it through the political process, which is absolute bunk. I almost said it, something I shouldn't. It's bunk. It's bunk. That is not political activism. That's political gaming, where you rely on the system to fix the problem that the system created, allowed to exist. Political activism is, I put pressure on you politically and socially and culturally to change and mold, to adapt to the view I want you to take. But if you're not in the right mindset, if you're not in the right cultural milieu, if you will, that's not okay. It's not acceptable. It gets you labeled a terrorist. It gets you labeled dangerous. It gets soccer moms who are fed up with CRT and all the other, the gender, queer theory and gender theory and feminine theory and all. If you're not in line with that and you show up to a school board meeting doing political activism, that's dangerous. And you should have the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security should be hunting you down. So you do activism, but yours is a little different. It's not like you just show up to school board meetings. It's not like, and I'm not saying you haven't. I don't know whether or not you have. But let's take the case of Spike standing up for his friend there in Gastonia, which isn't too far from you, is it?
No, it's about an hour and a half.
Yeah. So he Josh, correct? And Pastor Moses. He's gone there to Gastonia. That's activism. But your kind of activism is a little different because you actually get out and get behind candidates as well.
Yes. So there's the beautiful thing about activism is that it's just taking ideas and putting them into action. That's the simplest form of what activism is. Whether it's protesting against a measure, protesting against an idea, protesting against an order, or if that's going and sitting in front of a county council like what Spike is doing each and every month in Gastonia, North Carolina, or if that's similar to what I'm doing, where I'm sitting representatives that are elected, I'm sitting them down and having long-form conversations, public long-form conversations around a topic so that the public can see not only my perspective as to why I believe what I believe, but also putting them on the hot seat where they're like, I have to justify civil asset forfeiture, for example. And so the important thing when it comes to activism is that we come at it from so many different directions that they can't just merely ignore when we go old school and we here's the funny thing. A lot of governments still run on fax machines because they're archaic in the way that they function. So we will bind up their fax machines still to this day. Just send fax after fax. It's expensive, but you just keep sending fax machines or faxes over to them and it binds them up. In some of the different offices, it still functions and still works. It's incredible. But there's so many different ways that we can come about this. And so I sit down with candidates and I change their hearts and minds as they're on the campaign trail. Recently we had a special election here in Greenville County, South Carolina for the sheriff's office. And I had all of the Republicans with the exception of one because he was a gun grabber and I don't support gun grabbers at all. I sat them all down at different times and I talked to them about civil asset forfeiture. I got them all to lean further and further away from civil asset forfeiture. And so they all supported ending civil asset forfeiture in our county. that's a major part of activism, is sitting down and showing people you not only respect them as a person, but you also want the best for them, the best for yourself, and the best for your community. So that's kind of the angle that I've been taking on a lot of this stuff, is working with the legislators, working with the people in office, and of course trying to work with coalitions to build up different ideas. Now, there's a lot of other practices that we can do, and I've learned quite a few of those going to different courses. But I think that that's the one that I found I'm the most successful and the most influential in, is actually working directly with candidates.
So I like what you were saying about showing them that you're reasonable. Like, I've offered my platform to like probably 1,000 people who disagree with me. They'll come on and make some one-off comment about, oh, you're, the favorite is I have a guy that like about once every 3 weeks he comments on one of my videos. I don't associate with cults.
Me neither.
I don't even I'm like, what? I don't get it. But anyway,
yeah.
But I've offered my platform to literally thousands of people over the 2+ years that I've been doing this now, and I've yet to actually, outside of like man on the street conversations, get anybody to take me up on it. But one of the things that I have been able to do is an in-person at event and a like in particular with one particular school board here in southern Minnesota. I was summoned by a group of people. Like, we're having trouble with our school board. We know that they're going to be implementing some stuff, and we know that they've done it in the past, but they won't talk to us. Could you show up and help us walk through this? So the very first school board meeting that I showed up to, it was out of hand the way they were treating the people. Like, even one of the school board members asked a question of the superintendent, and the superintendent wouldn't answer her. Like, literally, this lady's your boss, bro. And the people in the crowd were like, hey, wait a minute. She asked a question. She deserves an answer. And they tried to gavel the crowd down and said, oh, no, you will not talk during this time. There, you will remain silent. And I weighed in and I said, look, you don't have the authority to tell these people to be quiet.
No.
I was like these people are demanding an answer, and they want an answer, and you need to give it to them right now. I said, that man works for her. He needs to answer her. And the school board chair then approached me afterwards. He's like, well, I think we got off on the wrong foot. And I'm like, yeah, we did. Because you were out of line. We had a little bit of a conversation, but things continued to go south over the next few meetings that I attended, to the point where we started to pack that place to the point where they had no room. But then they were going to start kicking people out because they had packed it with teachers, and they had like multiple people from the media were given a special table. They had tables set up for like administrative staff and all of this stuff, and they were over fire capacity. And I finally said in that meeting, to everybody, I said, don't leave. You don't leave. You don't leave. Just because they say you're at fire capacity, you're never going to get anywhere with them, because they're going to constantly pack this room with people who are on their side. So demand change of venue for meetings going forward. And until they agree with it, we keep packing this room full of people.
Yeah.
Two meetings later, they switched it to an auditorium that could accommodate everybody. Now, I'm not saying I did that. The people did that because they continued to send in email after email after email and phone call after phone call after phone call. But this isn't TC patting himself on the back. This is me saying, I went up at the end of that meeting and directly addressed them after the meeting and said, this meeting went better than any of the other meetings that I have been here to witness and document, because you guys finally listened to the people and changed the venue. And the reason why the tension was lower was because you showed you could accommodate. And I said, you will continue to see your meetings get better if you continue to accommodate the will of the people. And that's a thing that's lacking in a lot of activism, is that when the left does their activism, they don't ever thank anybody when they get their way.
No,
They continue to
keep
do.
pushing.
They keep pushing. Exactly. They continue to push. It's like It's like you say something they don't agree with. They demand an apology, and you give an apology, and then they tell you your apology isn't enough, and they continue to demand even more. But you've already proven you have no spine, so they're going to keep doing that.
Mm-hmm.
What the conservative, whether it be a constitutional conservative libertarian, or if you're a conservative Republican or non-affiliated type, you need to do the same thing that the left does, but you need to do it with respect. You need to do it with, like my friend Kent, my Canadian friend, who's probably should check his bank accounts now. What he said is be civil and gracious. Exactly. You can have impact. You can be forceful in your word, in your speaking, in your verbiage. But when they do something to show that they're acquiescing to you, you thank them for it.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
that's the difference between how a constitutional conservative who's doing political activism does things versus what the left does when they're trying to demand. Because they'll walk in, fill up a room, they'll call you every name under the sun, they'll chant, they'll scream, they'll holler, they'll throw a fit. They'll finally get their way, and guess what? They'll come back and do the same thing at the next meeting and the next meeting and the next meeting and the next meeting, but nobody does anything to them because they're terrified of that approach. They're terrified of that. And we go ahead. Sorry, I went on a rant.
Oh, you're good. You're good. A good description of this, or a good reference point for this, was at Evergreen State College in Lacey, Washington.
Yep. If I know you've watched it, but if anybody's wondering, I'll try and find it, or maybe you can help send me the links, and we'll put them in the description of the video here. The documentary that went out about that shows just how bad that is. But go ahead and describe it.
Yeah, so they had so schools in different cultures around the country, they've had days where it's a day without Black people, and so it was a voluntary day that if you were a Black person at that time, you could take the day off, and people would just kind of be okay with it. Well, at Evergreen State College, that wasn't enough. It was to try to show like that Black people are appreciated within the community. So a day without them, you'd be like, oh, they're not here. And then you'd appreciate them when they came back. That was the intent with this. Well, Evergreen State College took it a step further and decided to say it was a day without white people. And so
they expected all of the white people to not show up.
It was not a voluntary thing. And so you had Eric Weinstein. I believe it was Eric. I always get him and the other Weinstein. Eric Weinstein was a professor there at Evergreen State College. And he's like, I have a job to do, so I'm going to show up for work. And so he showed up, and the mob came into his room. They threatened him. They threatened everybody. Police were called. He had to be escorted out. And he was either threatened to be fired or was fired as a result of showing up to do his job that day.
It's the documentary goes into a lot of detail about it. I mean, they were hunting for him, literally. I'm not just saying like they were like to scream at him. They were headhunting him. Like an officer stopped him. I think he was on his bike. I think the story said he was on his bike. He was riding his bike, and the officer stopped him when he got on campus and told him, "You had better go home. Go home.
Yeah,
you will.
I'd never seen the documentary.
Yeah, there's a documentary about it. I think it was multiple parts.
Yeah, I was covering it live when it was happening, and then right after that, you had what was it? The dark web created by like Ben Shapiro. Jordan Peterson was in on it. Eric Weinstein was in on it. There was a lot of those people, the right side intellectuals. They created that, and that was one of the big things as to why Eric was a part of the movement.
It was Eric's brother Brett. Kent was reminding us it's Brett Weinstein.
Brett. Okay.
I think it's Dark Horse Podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly. Well, no, it's not if. Brett does not consider himself a conservative. He considers himself he's a progressive. Maybe he might be more classically liberal now, maybe a little bit more libertarian now in some of his views after what he's been through. But at the time, he was a progressive. But he said it was his progressive values that made him say, I can't abide by this. And that's the kind of violent activism that gets the attention that everybody loves and adores. That's how we end up with people saying, well, it's fiery, but it's mostly peaceful.
Yeah, no, for real. Elon Musk recently tweeted this out, and this really would fit well with Brett Weinstein, because it was a picture of the ground. You've got a person standing on the left, you got a person standing on the right. I realize it's flipped for you guys. So a person standing on the left, a person standing on the right, and you have the center line. Well, you have a person standing here between the center line and on the left. Sorry, flipping around again. And so they're standing there, and over time the line keeps expanding, so the middle ground eventually leads to where that person who is in between is now on the right side. And so the left person pushes them over, knocks them on the ground, the right person picks them up, and they're like, how dare you side with them? And it's just like, you guys left so many people behind. And Brett is a prime example of this. They've pushed so far left that reasonable people, as you said, classical liberal people that are not leftist are being left behind. And now they realize they don't have a party out there for them. They realize that their views may align more with the conservative right. So we may see some shifting on how expansive the right side of the aisle looks. But there's a lot there that we have to find a home for these people, but also not let them say, hey, well, we still need a huge giant social safety net. We still need, this big giant government. It's like, no, you got to, if you're coming to us, come and be a part of us, but also assimilate with us and understand that we have to fight against this.
Here's the thing. You look at the entire walk away movement. I don't know if you're familiar with walk away.
Yes.
But the entire walk away movement was about, especially homosexuals, gays and lesbians, going, I don't understand what's happening. I didn't want any of this.
Yeah.
I wanted nothing to do with this at all. And yet it's being, foisted on them without a choice. Like it's forced teaming of, oh, you're gay, you're lesbian, whatever. You have to be part of this. And they're over there going, I don't want anything to do with this. And they're left without a home. And quite frankly, a lot of times the Republicans are over there going, oh, we don't want you because you were over there on the left and you're, whatever your ideology was or what you identify as, whatever. We can't have that here. And I have become, I wouldn't say good friends, but I've become friends with a guy named Josh Slocum who hosts a show called Disaffected. And he approaches the issues of, he's been on the show, but he approaches the issues of especially gender ideology and gender theory from the perspective of addressing it from cluster B personality disorders. And he talks about it, and he talks about how he has felt abandoned and pushed out because he doesn't want to take part in all of the other stuff that's going on in that community. And he feels politically homeless. He even asked a question before I had him on, and we talked about it when I had him on my show. We talked about it. He goes, what do my friends and my followers, how do you guys view me? Do you, politically, what do you see in me? And I told him both in his response on Twitter, but also in our conversation, I'm like, you're kind of a classical liberal. You're more libertarian. There's a home for you because you have some conservative constitutional ideology, and you're going to remain homeless because the Democrats don't want anything to do with you because you call out the garbage that they do, and you rightly pick on people like AOC and others. But the Republicans are going to shy away from you as well because, you're openly gay and you have no plans on changing. And now we can have a conversation about whether or not my religious ideology says, my religious dogma or my doctrine says whether or not what you're doing is sinful. But that doesn't mean I can't align myself with you when it comes to a political fight that we're in the middle of.
Yeah.
And that's what's wrong right now is we are looking at people's personal descriptors, their sexuality, their gender, their work that they do, whatever it might be, and we say, "Oh, I can't have this person. I can't have this person on my side. I can't stand with this person." And the problem with that is we're leaving them homeless.
Yeah.
We're leaving those people homeless, and we're losing allies in a fight that, like, I am not overreacting here. People need to wake up. We are in a fight for our republic right now.
We're in a fight for our lives.
It ultimately, as the republic slips, it will be for our lives. What do you think red flag laws are for, right? I mean, am I wrong?
Gary Willis would be alive without them.
now you got to tell people who Gary. You see, yeah, dropping. We're just gonna. This is going all night, folks. So if you want us to stop, more super chats. That's what that is.
So Gary Willis, in Maryland, shortly after passing the red flag laws, Gary Willis was in a family dispute. I believe it was with his sister or his cousin. They got into an argument, and so the neighbor saw this and was not a fan of gun ownership and the Second Amendment. So she called in and she reported Gary Willis for being angry and for being just being a torment and a risk to society around him with his guns. So the police followed up there in Maryland, went to his house approximately 5:30 in the morning, knocked on his door, and they said, "Give us your guns." And he said, "No, like, I have due process. No, you're not going to take my guns." So a scuffle ensues and he was shot and killed on his front doorstep.
And their justification was he was reaching for a gun.
Yes. So,
and we're talking about an older guy too. It wasn't some punk kid.
57 is ringing in my head. It might be a 63, somewhere in that range.
Old like me.
Yeah. So he was well experienced and wise. But
it all stemmed from somebody having a desire to hurt him. I mean, that's what it was. It was utilizing the force of the state on somebody that you disagreed with.
Yes. and so but to your point about your friend who happens to be gay and everything else, I thought this was beautiful because we circle all the way back to the beginning of this episode when we were talking about steel man versus straw man. And I think that one of the worst things that we do as an ideology is we get so entrenched, right? When we think about what it means to be conservative, what it means to be a constitutionalist, what it means to be a libertarian, and there's 1,001 things that are in this list, right?
Primarily to be a conservative, you have to be a white nationalist, Nazi, white supremacist, right?
All right, get out of here, CNN. But so
somebody's going to clip that out, by the way.
But we have this long list of what it means, right. And at the end of the day, if somebody doesn't hit 5 of the 1,000, if somebody doesn't hit 100 of the 1,000, right? If they're batting 90%, are we straw manning them to keep them away, or are we steel manning them in order to help bring them to that 95%, to that 97%, to that 99%, to even that 100%? So rather than taking instead, how about we go at it with compassion and with empathy, bring people in, because if we have the best ideas, it doesn't matter where they came from. It matters where they're going, and they might as well come to the right side of the aisle on this.
Right. Or left, right? No. the proper side of the aisle. Well, I think that one of the I don't know how much you listen to Part of the Problem if you tune into Dave and Robbie very
used to
often.
Be a frequent flyer, but not as much anymore. Nothing against them, but yeah.
No, I know there's, they're definitely entrenched in the Mises caucus. Not everybody's what I get it. I know there are people on the opposite end of the Mises caucus, and then there's a Mises caucus, and then there's people over there going, I just want the Libertarian Party to be libertarian. That's
I have the Libertarian in my American flag. That is the porcupine. Like, I just want libertarianism.
right. No, I get it. But one of the things that they say that I and they say a lot of stuff, them, Tom Woods and others say a lot of stuff that I agree with, because obviously it's constitutionally conservative kind of stuff, and it rings well with me. But one of the things that they say, and I think Tom Woods says this a lot too, is no, we're not the best of both parties. We're our own party. And I'm like, and I because I run into that a lot with people who don't understand libertarianism. They always point out to they straw man the hell out of it. And I got a friend, I pick on him all the time. If he gets around to watching this, we have at least 2 or 3 times a week we'll have this conversation. Well, ultimately, if libertarianism's taken to its end, it ends up in chaotic anarchy. I'm like, no, it literally doesn't. They don't believe in any laws. I'm like, that's literally not what they believe. What do you do about the roads?
Oh, I love my roads. My roads. Who's gonna pay for my roads? Well, Domino's showed us that they'll take care of the roads
better than. and so it's fun. It's fun to laugh about, but the reality is that we straw man the crap out of each other, and ultimately we get so busy building up those straw men just to burn them down that we're not engaging in a way to find out those places where we agree, because we're really intent on tearing apart the other person's platform. And what we end up finding out most of the time, well, there again, my Canadian friend Kent, I'll just flash this up there again just so I can pick on him for this, but he and I agree on firearms, but
it's about to agree.
But he's a Canadian, so his culture of firearms is different than the culture of my culture of firearms. So he and I understand this. He has a different perspective on shall not be infringed, because he didn't grow up in the shall not be infringed perspective. He grew up in a
shall be infringed.
And that's not to straw man him. That's the way it works in Canada. We do have control over what you can have. We do have control over what you do with what you have. But we both know that firearms are the only way for people to protect themselves from a tyrannical government.
Yes.
Or from a psychopath who wants to travel around your neighborhood and kill people. Like happened in Nova Scotia with the guy who dressed up like the RCMP officer, dressed up like an RCMP officer, drove around in his car made out to look like an RCMP car, and killed a bunch of people.
It's terrible.
And we have to find not a middle ground, but we have to find the ground where we both stand on solidly and say, look, this is beyond whether or not it's a shall be infringed or may be infringed or shall not be infringed, and say firearms protect us from tyranny. Now, how do we get there? And how do we work this out? And there are people in the United States who have a different cultural perspective on firearms than I do, because they've grown up in a culture where firearms are not part of their daily life. They're not part of their home life at all.
Yeah.
And so if I can have that conversation with my friend Kent from Canada, then I should be able to have that conversation with somebody here in the United States. But what do? And I just put a video out on Facebook the other day, and then I downloaded it and put it up on my YouTube, where I said we have to stop arguing the way they argue. When they throw out red flag laws, we don't say, well, red flag laws don't work. Or when, background checks don't work, psych evals don't work, then they're not going to save any lives. Don't have that argument with them.
Yeah.
You have the argument with them this way. The only way for me to save my life from a tyrannical government or a marauding murderer is for me to have the firepower that I need to protect myself, my family, my neighborhood, and my community. Period. But if you say background checks don't work, they'll go, well, what does work? The only way for you to stop all the gun crimes, all the murders, is to take all the guns. Then their response is, thank you very much. I'm glad you agree with us.
Yeah.
That's exactly what they're doing. And we're over here playing chess while they're playing checkers. Or we're playing checkers while they're playing chess, I should say. They're thinking 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 moves ahead of us, and we're over here reacting.
They're playing incrementalism change, and when you fight the first step, they're already moving to the second step. It's incredibly rings true. After Stoneman Douglas High School was shot up down there in Florida, Parkland, Florida, there was March for Our Lives, and there was probably a Saturday. I took my wife. We went downtown, went to lunch, and I see the barricades coming up. I see the police out there, and I say, "Oh, geez, what is going on out there?" So we quickly pulled out our phones, because thank God for Google and all them, and find out, hey, it's March for Our Lives. So I said, okay, there's a CVS 3 blocks down. I'm going to go grab me a sign, and I'm going to write some statistics on the sign, and I'm going to stand out there. So this was back in 2017 about. And so I wrote them. The first one I wrote was between 500,000 and 3 million defensive use of firearms in accordance with the last gun safety studies CDC was allowed to do in 2014. Over 80% of homicides are committed with the gun's non-legal owner. And I had a couple more. And I said, how are more laws going to help? And I had that because I wanted to create enough controversy to have people come up and talk to me. But
how'd that go for you, bro?
Oh, it was fantastic. Because
okay.
as soon as they came up, I mean, there was plenty of people throwing slurs and stuff. And I was like, expected. I understand. I'm being controversial for a reason. But I had people that were like, I had never seen those before. Let's have a conversation. And so we opened the floor. And so I said, I agree with you. I want there to be no more school shootings. I want there to be no more homicides. I want, whether it's a single woman with 3 kids to be able to protect her family, I want her to be protected. And I wish that law enforcement could be out on every street corner. I wish that we could do these things. I said, but the best thing that we can do is to make these things more available. And one of the persons I was talking to...
law-abiding citizens.
Yes. Yeah. Because that's arguably, that's kind of what I wanted to convey to them, was it's a law-abiding citizens who these laws are going to be hitting on. It's not going to be touching the people that are already going to be committing these crimes, because they're crimes.
That's activism. What you did was activism. Even if it wasn't planned, it was activism.
Exactly. And so I took that opportunity, and I actually had one of the organizers from here in the county who set up this march to set it all up. I actually got him. We sat down, had the conversation. I brought him out to a gun range, and I gave him his first firearm to ever shoot. Now, I was scared as hell, because I'm not scared when other people are shooting. I used to shoot all the time. I worked in I was a suppressor manufacturer for a while for one of the great suppressor companies in this country. But this guy, imagine a leftist and putting a gun in a leftist's hands.
Did you give him PTSD?
Thankfully not. He actually has changed his view entirely on that. So we've chipped in the wall of his leftist views. Hopefully one day we can get him on healthcare. One day, hopefully we can get him on education. Hopefully one day we can use his activism for good rather than for the growth of government. But it was just incredible to see that fracturing, and I felt disgusting because I had to be controversial in order to get it started. But as soon as you get those opportunities, be empathetic, be compassionate, find where that common ground is, not the middle ground, because that's we don't like that. But find the common ground and grow that ground as much as you can.
Yeah, thanks for using the phrase "common ground," because I don't think it's something that gets used enough by myself or even others. Is that it's just middle ground never ends well. I mean, it's literally sitting on a barbed wire fence.
It's going to step 2, 3, and 4 for them.
Yeah. You're sitting on a barbed wire fence, and if you're a guy and you're sitting on a barbed wire fence, parts of you are going to get ripped off when they move that fence, and you try to stay where you are. I know it's a horrible image, but that's exactly what it is. It's fence sitting, and it's never. So the only way to protect yourself is to move along with it when they move it, and that's it. And we have to find that common ground. And I ask people constantly, name one gun law that's been passed that has saved one life. Name one. I mean, murder's already illegal, so
making areas soft targets has caused many a life. But
well, it's true. So I used to say, this is going to get me in trouble with a few of I have a couple of friends that are teachers. Arming teachers isn't the answer. I mean, have you looked at the majority of teachers today? I have a couple of good friends that are teachers that could handle it.
Yeah,
they would handle the business. Trust me, they would handle it. But the vast majority of teachers today are too busy trying to figure out what their gender pronouns are at the beginning of class every day to worry about whether or not they're going to have the wherewithal to take down a shooter. The other part of that is I have a perfect solution to ending mass shootings in government schools.
And
close them all down.
Yes.
Close them all down. Because name one thing apart from the military that the government does that they do well. One thing besides the military. And I'm even kind of the point now where we might be better off with the privatized military.
Thank you.
Might be better off with the privatized military.
That was my other comment.
But there's nothing. Like they can't even, the VA can't even take care of the vets.
Oh.
The VA is actually more interested in political correctness and disarming the veterans than they are taking care of the veterans. They'd rather disarm you than take care of your PTSD or your other problems. But can I? No, go ahead, please interject.
Let me jump on that real quick because this is something a lot of people didn't get to hear. So there was an amazing act that was passed under Trump. It was called the Mission Act, the VA Mission Act. What this act did was, because the VA wasn't able to provide the health care that was promised to veterans, because there were long drives for many veterans to go to these clinics to be seen, because there was such a long time in between these appointments and everything else, the VA Mission Act made it to where the VA would pay for veterans to go to see private clinics so that they can get timely appointments, so that they didn't have to drive as far, so that this would be more reasonable for them. And so the VA itself, the executives at the VA, blocked this from actually being allowed. So something that was passed in Congress, signed into law by Trump, was blocked by VA because they would rather play politics than to actually serve the veteran community.
You look at the situation. No, quit apologizing. That's why I brought you.
No, I was saying it's shocking.
Oh, I thought you said sorry.
I'm like, oh no, I won't apologize for them. No. This is them at their best. When
you think about it, I don't think there's a vet clinic that probably, some of them are animals. I don't think there's an actual VA hospital or VA clinic per se in the state of Alaska.
No, there's not.
Yeah. Okay. So let's think about that. Are there no vets in Alaska? So the only thing that an Alaskan vet can do is travel to Washington or Montana.
Yep.
Which is, we're not talking about, just driving a couple of hours across the border. You literally have to take the Alcan or the Pacific Coast down, and that's a lot of risk and a lot of money.
Yeah.
And in most vets who are struggling aren't the kind of people that have a lot of surplus cash sitting around that they can afford. And if they can afford that, they probably aren't going to be relying on the VA for their care. And yet here we are, and we're closing even more facilities.
Yep.
At a time where 22 or more a day are taking their own lives. and the VA wants to fight any kind of legislation that would hold them accountable for that. And so I'll just say it again. You name one thing that the federal state does and oversees, or the state does or oversees, that's done well. Name one. Name one. Like, even a leftist is going to have to go, I'll have to get back to you.
Yeah.
Because what do they always want? They always want more.
Yeah.
They always want more. Oh, we're not spending enough money on education. We're not spending enough money on teaching law enforcement how to do the right thing. Like, how much more money do you need? How much more do you want? And all of it, all the time, without fail. And that's the problem, is that, I had a doctor from Canada on several months ago, and he said, yeah, sure, you've got healthcare in Canada, but good luck if you've got a serious ailment and they deem that your ailment's not worth treating because this is coming from a doctor. This isn't just, some schloob who doesn't understand the system at all. The Canadians understand the system a lot better than we do. But literally, that he's like, if they deem that it's not treatable, you don't get treated. We'll try and make you comfortable, but that might be the end of it.
I think it's really important that when we talk about the healthcare aspect, of course, we're talking about the accessibility for doctors in Canada, but when we talk about it from when people advocate for government-ran healthcare in this country, the VA is a prime example of how good they would be. So for 3% of the population, they have no means and no ability to actually take care of them. Expanding that out another 97% would be just absolutely catastrophic in every way, shape, and form. And there's plenty of legislation that, I mentioned this in the beginning, certificate of need laws, where the government has created monopolies within the healthcare industry that, I'm actively working on ending it right now. I believe the state tally as of 2 years ago was 35 states and DC still have certificate of need laws, creating monopolies, creating panels, creating to where when you are already in the market, if somebody else wants to get involved, you have to ask your competitor if they're okay with you joining. I mean, just the worst kinds of things are enacted in this country, preventing good healthcare. But
that's not the only place that kind of stuff happens. It's not just healthcare. Yeah. It's literally goes down to you having chickens in your backyard in some cities.
Yeah.
I live in a municipality. It's 2,600 people. If I want to have chickens in my backyard, I have to go to my neighbors and get a signed statement saying they're okay with me having chickens, and then take it to the city. Now, some people go, well, that's what you want, right? You want limited government. Like, no, that's literally government telling me I have to get permission from people. And if they don't all sign off on it, then government won't allow me to have the chickens.
Yeah.
So put that in practical, not just the certificate of need aspect where you have to go to your medical competitor to get permission from your medical competitor to compete against your competitor. And the competitor is going to go, no, I'm not going to have you compete with me because you're probably going to do it better than me. Like, it's literally, I can't get eggs at the store anymore. And I love chicken. Can I have permission from you, neighbor? Nope. And the city's like, they said no.
Denied. Yeah.
Denied. It doesn't matter if it's good for you or not. It's literally denied because we're gonna, what's best. We know what's best for you, which is to force you to ask everybody else whether or not you should have chickens.
We have to have social compliance for you to, we have to have social compliance for you to have your freedoms. It's right. It's such a terrible.
And I promise you, if I have chickens, they will not aggress you. I will have non-aggressive chickens. I might even give you some
eggs. Yeah, I might even give you eggs on Christmas.
I might even give you eggs on Juneteenth.
There we go. Look at that. Bringing the community together.
Bringing it down. But, it's what's funny, and this is you're probably going to get kicked off of the network now for this, but I got a lot of people are probably listening to this going, I thought this guy was a libertarian.
Always. So I'm going to say the faux pas word that people don't want to hear unless they're deep in the circles. I am an anarchist. See, Uh,
Well, but there again, it goes back to the idea of what is anarchy? Because
yeah,
anarchy is not what everybody. There's social anarchy, and there is chaotic anarchy, and there's
yeah,
anarcho-capitalism and all those other things. But anarchy is not what every. It's the old west. I'm like, okay, well, was the old west really all that bad? Ultimately, I mean, there were some things that maybe socially they were a little awkward on,
yeah.
but
But it's not even.
you didn't
You
you
wouldn't
didn't
even go
touch a
that
baby
far.
more than once.
Yeah, no, not at all. But it's also is like the idea. That here's what a lot of people miss is they're like, well, you don't like our government in the way that it functions. Absolutely, as you said, you
Name
could
something they've
possibly
done.
give it the you could possibly give it the military, but everything else is clear cut. But it's like, so could the market provide those functions better? And I would argue in every single case. And if it couldn't, it probably isn't necessary, right? We don't necessarily need to have every single department and agency that we have from these governments. A lot of them are redundant and the way that they function and they don't work to the betterment of society. I don't really think we need an inclusivity and a diversity portion of the government. I don't, but there's a panel for it. So, but the things,
I think we would be much better off if we had a broader, more all-encompassing disinformation board. Our,
I
I,
I
I
can't
really,
disagree there.
I think
I
we really need a lot more of that,
Yeah, no, that's what we need.
run
Because
by
it's going to
somebody
be
who's
different.
actually got a really good Broadway voice. So.
Um, but so to that effect, right? We would still have law enforcement officers. We would still have peace officers. We would still have a militia that would be there to protect for terms of actual defense, rather than sending our troops halfway across the world and saying this is for defense. Um, a lot of the things a lot of the things that we have today, we would still have those, but it would actually be in a responsible and accountable entity given by the market rather than enforced by coercion
Let's
by taxes.
let's use the HOA as an example. When you live in a gated community that happens to also be an HOA, who mans the gate? Nothing more than a private law enforcement officer is really what it is. That
Yeah,
person is there to protect that community, period. And there's probably, if it's a big enough gated community, there's probably 3 or 4 of them per shift in that gated community. But guess what else? It's a really good gate. Why? Because the community is paying for it. They get
yes,
together, they band together, and they say, we're going to hire top notch security to enforce our safety. Oh, and guess what else we're going to do? We're going to build a really nice gate. But guess what else? When you turn onto this road and you happen to get through the gate because you belong in the neighborhood or you've been invited in the neighborhood, you'll notice something else. Our roads are a lot nicer. Guess
beautiful.
what else you're going to notice? You're going to notice that the yards are nicer. And everybody's like, well, that's because those are people are wealthy. No, that's because they have their standards and they enforce it locally. They
They
enforce
have
it
a buy
in the
into that system.
they have a buy-in to the system, as opposed to your neighbor who only mows their yard now because if they don't, the city will mow it and then charge them $85 for it and cite them for it. And then if you don't pay it, send somebody out to arrest you for not mowing your yard ultimately. So then they only mow it and they don't take care of it. But boy, with the buy-in issue, you really kind of take care of things. And I got news for
You're
you
proud.
that you're proud of it. And that HOA, they're not redoing that road every 10 to 15 years. Because the first time they put that road in, the contractor they hire to put that road into that community is going to do a damn good job of it, because they're going to look at them and go, and if I have to replace this road again in 10 years, we're going to come after you civilly for this. You're
Yeah,
paying for it.
yeah.
But not
Now,
in the public sector. In the public sector, you got to put out 1,400 different bids and get all these requests for bids, and then probably do it all sealed so nobody knows what the bid is, and then they pick the bid, and they either pick the buddy who sent in the bid because the buddy also gets some sort of thing out of it, or you get something from the buddy somewhere, even though that never happens. And then they get paid extra for getting the job done sooner, but there's no penalty if they don't finish it on time. And the incentive to finish it sooner makes them work faster, which isn't actually getting the work done better. It's just getting it done quicker. So now the road falls apart in 5 years. And then they come back and go, oh, by the way, we know you're still paying your assessment on that last one, but we're redoing your road again. So your assessment's going to go back up. And the whole process starts all over again.
Yep.
So you either get
Fast,
the cheapest
cheap,
or you
quality.
get the best kickback. That's all you get.
Yeah. Fast, cheap, and quality. Which of the two do you want?
I
want
fast quality.
Yeah. And it's going to be expensive. But so it's one of those things that we trust these governments to run these things. Now, I've lived here in South Carolina in my area for 6 years. They've been working on the same interchange for 6 years. And it's already breaking the stuff that they did when they first started. They have no intention because and the best way to think about this, and for anyone of your audience that's ever owned a business, that's ever been involved and engaged in business, or even has ever, been able to do transactions for other people, when you have your own money that you worked and put your blood, sweat, and tears into it, you basically take the Dave Ramsey take and you put a face and a name to each one of your dollars. You value those dollars. And so you want to make sure that you're stretching your dimes into dollars, you're stretching your dollars into tens and everything else. You want to make that last and you want to, take care of it. If you find $20 on the ground walking into Walmart, you're gonna be like, I'm gonna go blow this on something I don't really need. You don't value it in the same way. And government comes to that money with that $20 from Walmart because they just show up to work and the money's comes in. They don't have
if I find $20 on the ground in front of a Walmart, I'm looking around to see if somebody sent me up to take me down. That's what
You're probably right.
And I'm not going to tell anybody because somebody from the state will show up to want to take their cut. So
yeah.
But I get what I get. Right. Exactly. The state doesn't care what they do with it because all they have to do is basically come to you and through the threat of force and say, give us more to do more.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're willing to throw more money at things because they don't have any ownership of the money. It's your money. It's my money. It's all of our money.
I've had this. We home educated our kids from start to finish. Our kids didn't spend a single day in a government a government school. Kids aren't perfect, they're like, well, look at your kids now. And I'm like, hey, shut up. Leave my kid. Leave my failures out of my kids' lives. No, no one's ever actually said that. But if I have to worry about my kids being screwed up, I want to be the reason they're screwed up.
Yeah.
Let it be because I screwed up. Warwick mustn't. You and Warwick must know each other very well.
Yes, I am absolutely talking about I-85 385 interchange. Absolutely.
I don't. You and Warwick must know each other. Or you have some idea who each other are.
He just lives in the upstate of South Carolina, I'm assuming.
Well, I don't know if he's here because he saw you mention it or whatnot. So
maybe it looks familiar, but anyways.
But seriously, I mean, it sounds like a really weird thing to say about a government school. But if I have to worry about my kids getting messed up, then let me mess them up. Because I've had people go, if we completely shut down the Department of Education at the federal level and at the state level, who's gonna run the schools? And I'm like, literally anybody. Anybody. Well, what if they're not teaching? I'm like, what are they teaching now? I mean, honestly, what that's what the last year has been about with all the school board uproar, is that parents all of a sudden found out what was getting taught to their kids because the leftists went too far and too fast and forced your kids to go home where you could look on the computer and go, what did they just tell you?
Yeah.
I mean, like, I'm going to the next school board meeting when they let me back into the building. And all of a sudden they're like, so the coof was good for something.
Yeah, no, it exposed
It
a lot.
It exposed a lot.
lot.
So are they really teaching your kids how to do reading, writing, and arithmetic? I mean, I can't even write in cursive, and I was taught cursive, but they're not even teaching kids that, and math isn't a priority. Like we took our daughter in for kindergarten roundup. This was a long time ago, because she just turned 24. So we took her in for kindergarten roundup. If everybody, if you've ever taken your kids into, everybody kind of knows what kindergarten roundup is. It's just to kind of get a feel for what it's going to be like. And so these complete strangers who my daughter didn't know at the age of 5 or whatever kind of came up, said, "Hey, we're going to take her and we're going to talk to her." And they take our daughter away into another room and they ask her a bunch of questions and ask her to tie her shoes and ask her all, colors and numbers and all this stuff. And they come back and I'm probably exaggerating the story a little bit, but it's fun. And they're like, "Well, we don't know if she's ready to start school this year. She's a little slow." And I'm like, "Wait a minute. What are you talking about?" "Well, she couldn't count, and she couldn't recite colors, and she couldn't tie her shoes." And I said, "Well, first of all, she does know her colors. She does know how to count. And the shoe tying thing, every kid, I mean, I still struggle, tying my shoes." And I asked this question very clearly. I said, "So what are you teaching them?" I'm not making up. So what is your job as a teacher in kindergarten, but to work on teaching them these things?
Yeah.
Well, we're primarily concerned with socialization and in that first year. And I literally, I'm not kidding you. I looked at my daughter, I looked at them, I looked at my wife, and I said, "Well, thank you very much. Your services will not be required."
Yeah.
And we walked out and we never went back.
It's really interesting.
And that was over 20, that was 20 years ago. 20 years ago. You think it's gotten better?
No, absolutely not. But it's really interesting because we've over the last 20 years, we've done a lot more studies into like how child development works and everything else. And I don't know when the origination of this, but IEPs of like special needs for different kids, this doesn't mean that they're quote unquote special.
Individual education plans.
Yeah. So we know that kids learn differently because of that, but there's also the idea that if in your circumstance you show up to a kindergarten, you've got your daughter, you have a stranger that takes your daughter into a room that she has no connection with, and the person's like, "Okay, count to 10," and she's like, "Who are you?"
Right.
Like, leave me alone.
Right.
Yeah. I have my 2-year-old and I'll come home from work and she'll be like, "Hi, Daddy." I'll be like, "Hi, what'd you do today?" She's like, "I'm not talking to you, stranger." It's like, I was at work for like 10 hours. What do you mean? Like,
no, that's just your daughter being a girl.
Yeah, no, I know it's a struggle. But there's so much the stuff that's just like, you can't just sit a kid down, pull them off into their own and be like, "Well, they're just not ready for this." And it's like, the whole premise of kindergarten is to start learning basic functions and to get them ready for first grade. It shouldn't be to socialize. And I know like that's the argument that a lot of people have of why public school is so important, but also public schools are a 9-to-1 ratio for violence compared to any other school.
I posted something a month or so ago, and I said, "So all of my conservative Christian friends who think your kids need to be in a public school for socialization, how's that working out for you right now?"
Yeah.
Are you real happy with your 7-year-old seeing a drag queen perform at their pep rally?
Yeah.
So how's that working?
Not working. Yeah. It's just not working. And so,
I don't care. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's some pro Second Amendment guy. You might the only indoctrination that my children should be getting when it comes to that is the civics class, where they're taught what the Constitution is, what government is, and what the function of government should be, and who the government is. That's it. I don't need somebody to come in and teach my kid the values of the Second Amendment and the First Amendment. I'll teach them that at home.
Yeah.
Those are cultural values-driven things that I should be educating my children with at home. And that's been part of the problem with the inception of the government school system by long. That was the Dewey Decimal. The guy who found the Dewey Decimal System is the guy who planned the government education system. And their entire intent was to get the children out of the hands and the influence of the church and the family. He was an avowed Marxist. And when you tell people that, oh, you're just saying that, and I'm like, no, it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
And we fell for it because, well, the state told us we should do it, so therefore we should. We absolutely. Well, no, public schools have always been a thing. No, they haven't. No, they have not. They've not always been a thing. Education was always family or private in that sense.
Yep.
Or run by a local community, which wasn't public, because oftentimes it was all the churches and all the families, everybody was involved in deciding who to hire and what they were being taught.
It takes a village was life at one point. And now
it was actually the conservative constitutionalist mindset. And so thanks, Hillary, for co-opting that terminology, because she means something completely different than we do.
Yes.
If we're at a little over 2 hours of rambling, mostly on my part, but I think that we've kind of hit on. I think we've hit on the reality that these are the conversations we should be having.
Yes,
because we're going to find out we have a lot more in common, even in those places where maybe we might have variances, not disagreements per se, but variances. We have a lot more in common that we can work towards on those goals. And quite frankly, it opens up doors for us to be able to talk to people and say, we might disagree on something here, but I bet if we spend enough time talking it about, one of us is going to change, and it's probably going to be you.
Yeah, no,
because I have the logical position on this, and I'm not saying you, but I don't mean you and I, Jason, but metaphorically speaking, it's kind of a more civilized version of Steven Crowder's "Change My Mind" stuff.
It's a long.
He goes out there to incite people. I mean, it's funnier and I'll get out, but it's really what we're doing is change my mind.
I just realized that's what I did at the March for Our Lives, and that was before this. So I got to go after Steven Crowder for stealing my idea.
I was going to point out that that's what you had done, but I didn't know how you felt about Steven. I get a kick out of him. I don't watch him a lot, but I get a kick out of him.
So I used to be a big podcast guy. Loved podcasts, listened to them all day long. I changed careers, and so that hasn't been as available to me. That's when I listened to Part of the Problem. My everyday was Part of the Problem. Ben Shapiro, Louder with Crowder, Dave Rubin, and a couple of libertarian podcasters that are no longer active. But
Shapiro gets on my nerves. But
yeah, but it was like a well-rounded, like right side down to like anarchist libertarians. And it was just like, it's a good spectrum. I was getting good information, getting good.
I like it. Well-rounded anarchist. What?
Well-rounded down to
there again, another phrase that has never been uttered on my show.
I'm here for it. Double gold medalist Jason Lyon coming through. Amazing.
I'm gonna have to make up something to send you to put on your neck to wear that. You probably don't get to see Spike very often, but we just take a picture of yourself. Oh, have your wife make you a couple of gold medals that have my podcast on it. Minnesota Black Road Regiment gold medal winner.
Well, I don't know what your availability is, but me and Spike both will be in Ohio speaking at a criminal justice reform summit in August.
I heard you talking about that on your show today. I would love to be able to go down there, but I would have to have money.
I believe hotels are covered. Don't fact check me on that. But
I literally.
You just got You got 69 for a hamburger. You could choose the road or you could choose the burger.
No, it
Which
was $6.99, not 69. It was like
Oh,
$6.99.
uh,
Literally
But,
the price of a burger. No bun. Like
just
around here, that's just the burger, which I'm keto, so
inflation may have hit during the time of this podcast. You might not be able to afford the burger anymore.
But we're still thankful, Kent. We're very much we're very thankful.
Thanks for making me a gold medalist.
But
But
give me a summation of an issue that's near and dear to your heart that we haven't talked about, and why it's important to you, and why you think both conservative constitutionalists in the libertarian movement and in the Republican Party or independents, or maybe that disenfranchised Democrat who's finally said, I've had enough, needs to hear, and as an attraction to looking at reaching across the aisle to a side that they've never thought about before.
I think that one of the most important things when we look at the political landscape is once we realize that no matter how monstrous somebody's views are, at the end of the day, they're still a person, which means that they were sculpted by their environment. They were sculpted by who took them in, who worked with them, who built on their views, who pushed them away, and all of these other things. And that once we sit down and we actually have conversations with people, we will grow in ourselves, whether that is growing and being able to be more effective in our communication,
Yes.
growing and challenging our own views, and learning how to combat other people and their views. There are so many things that happen when we just sit down and get out of our own echo chambers and actually talk to people outside of those.
Yep.
That we will see a new perspective, and that can either embolden us or it can break us. And even if it breaks you, at the end of the day, when you come back and you pick yourself back up, you will be better because of it. You will never grow in comfort. You will only grow in a resistant and a harsh environment. So for me, get out there, have those conversations. If you believe you have the best idea, and I think everybody out here believes that they have the best ideas on things, put them to practice, talk to people, challenge people, see how you can influence your society, your culture, and make the world a better place because of it. We're watching far too many leftists out there winning in this cultural war because they're not afraid. They're not ashamed to step out and stand on their views. It's time that we stand up and we stand on our principles, on our values, and we actually share them, and we actually welcome people to welcome our views and our stances.
Yeah, exactly. And there again, you should be able to work across the aisle, so to speak, or across some apparent ideological divides to find that person who you would have never considered talking to before, whether they be a libertarian or maybe that person who's maybe a conservative Democrat who's always just been that blue dog Democrat and has always voted that way, but they're finally over there going, like my friend Josh and others, like I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I've been abandoned. Reagan said, this years ago, and not that Reagan was the end all and be all of presidents in the United States, but Reagan did say, like, I didn't leave the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party left me.
Yeah.
I said that, a few years ago about the Republican Party. I got out of the Republican Party after being a vice chair of my county party for some time, and said the Republican Party I didn't leave the Republican Party. It left me. I saw it years ago. Almost 20 years ago, I saw the direction it was headed in the state of Minnesota, and I walked away. Still vote that way, but that might be changing too. Hey, Jason, I'm going to put you in the green room, and I'm going to do a close, and then after the stream's done, I'm going to bring you back on, talk to you for just a couple of minutes. So
absolutely appreciate it. Thanks for having
me. Thank you. That's exactly what I was going to do. Thanks. By the way, for your time. So especially, I know that it's 10:39, and you probably didn't get to say goodnight to your kids. So
I said goodnight before I came on, but thank you so much for this opportunity tonight. I loved this conversation. It was great.
It's awesome. So now, give me a minute. Hey guys, this is why these conversations are incredibly important. I say this every single time I have somebody on, whether they're a person who tends to be exactly where I'm at theologically, doctrinally, philosophically, whether it's a libertarian or another Republican. These kind of conversations are incredibly important, and we need them to be had. We have to be having these conversations. This is how we make change. This is how we affect change. Be an activist. Once again, I'm going to just tell you, make sure you're checking out the coffee. If you want to order coffee, if you want to order merchandise, you can message me at tcpearson@protonmail.com. You can find me on Facebook at tcpearson. You can message me at Robe Regiment on Twitter. You can also go to my Subscribe Star, which has been scrolling along the bottom because I'm going to just shill for myself. I would like to make a little bit more money doing this because of everything that I have given up over the last couple of years because of doing this. So if you have it in your heart to go and sacrifice 1 cup of coffee a month, that like literally $3 is a cup of coffee. That's my entry level for being a patriot supporter of my content over at Subscribestar, and it's worth it. And we're going to, and Jason doesn't know this yet, but I'm going to at some point here in the next couple of days try to get him to give me some exclusive content for my Subscribestar, so that we can have a conversation over there that you guys will only get to see if you're on my Subscribestar, just like I did with Spike, where Spike and I announced that we're going to open TC and Spike's Chicken Shop, which isn't going to happen, but it was a fun conversation. So anyway, if you at all appreciate what I'm doing, head over to Subscribestar and join up over there. Otherwise, like, comment, and share. Drive me up in the algorithms. I am getting suppressed really bad right now. I went from getting a couple thousand views on all of my videos for a few weeks to now I barely break 100 sometimes. And I have over 2,200 subscribers. So you tell me I'm not being suppressed in the algorithm. They're doing something. I must be doing something right because I'm not getting everything right. So I do also want to tell you guys about Arden Sales Group. These guys are friends of the show and supporters in a sense. They're not official sponsors, but they do a wonderful job of being supportive of patriots, and they have helped me make some really great connections. And so what I want to do real quick is I just want to show you a little bit of what they do with their systems. If you have the time and the money, especially now that nobody's planning on vacationing right now because nobody can afford to drive anywhere, you might want to invest in something that Arden Sales Group does, which is a laser golf courses and laser shooting. And I'm going to just fast forward here to the part that I really like. Well, here we go. These folks are amazing. I wish I had this system in my house. This is real life training. Cops use stuff like this. Maybe not enough. But and who can't go? I mean, if you're going to have the system, you got to have duck hunting, especially up here in Minnesota. Or in South Dakota for the prairie dogs. But anyway, my friends, I am going to, with that, if I can figure out where my window is. With that, I'm going to tell you thank you for tuning in. Like, comment, and share. If you're watching this on the replay, hit the super thanks. Join the channel. Share it out. Help people find out what true libertarianism is. And until next time, as always, you guys know how I end this. So if you know it, say it with me. Till next time, Sic Semper. Tyrannus. Well, that's not. Oh my gosh, it's not working with me tonight. There we go. One more time. Say it with me. Sic Semper Tyrannus.
We are go for liftoff in T-30. Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment. Secondary guidance systems engaged. Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark. Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.